Hey everyone, I am so sorry. I am having connection issues once again. I do apologize if you have been trying to jump on here, and I'm hoping that we can get through this. So I'd like to say welcome to lesson 2 of Stitchucation. And today is going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to jump in a few minutes, but before I do, I want to just let you know what this particular video is going to be all about, or I should say this lesson, because this really is like a little mini workshop. So if you joined me last week, we really got familiar with several different stitch patterns. And then this week, we're going to kind of talk a little bit about what we learned. You know, I want you to really be thinking about that and just sort of be like that swatch explorer, if you will. But then we're going to get a little technical, but don't worry, it's not going to be that crazy. It's not super, super, super technical. But really what we're going to do is, you know, we're going to learn how to view our stitches as a tool for knowing what should come next, so that we can understand how to plot our stitches. So if you are in my Patreon group, then you would have gotten this PDF download, this handy dandy download, which I showed you last week for lesson number 1. You're seeing the opposite of this right now because I am on my selfie cam, which lets me see you guys better. But if you haven't gotten it already, for those of you, like I said, those of you that are members of Power Pearls Podcast on Patreon, you can get this on patreon.com/Power Pearls Podcast. It's a 4-page learning guide for today, and it's going to go through everything that we're talking about today, and then some, and some exercises that I really want you to try out on your own between today and next Friday, because we still have 2 more lessons, and I'm telling you, I've been working my butt off, so you're getting it all. I'm giving you the farm right here. You know how they say don't sell the farm? Well, I'm selling the farm. So if you guys have downloaded this already, I would love to know what you think, if you've had a chance to sort of peruse the PDF. Also, you can get this by going to the Facebook group, which is a private Facebook group, again, for the members of the podcast. And it's in the files. So obviously this video is live and it's free for anyone, so you're definitely going to get some value, but the extras are in Patreon and in the Facebook group, which is where a lot of the kind of nitty-gritty, if you will, no pun intended, but I guess there is a pun there, and that's where we really talk about this. This is where we can talk about any kind of struggles or any kind of questions that come up during the workshop, and just also do, like, you know, a little show and tell. So you guys that are here already, thanks for joining me, and I want you to just give a little shout out and say hey and where you're from, and then I'll get started with this awesome part 2, lesson 2, I should say lesson 2, because there's 4 parts, and then we'll get going. So I'm going to take a little look here and kind of look through the comments. So Jana has joined. Hello, Jana. Hi, Marie. And we have Deborah. What calculators do you prefer? So I'm not really sure what you mean. I know that yarn calculators or any kind of online calculators, I'm really not going to be talking about that, but calculator, I'll show you the materials. So this was the calculator that I talked about, at least if you're in the group and you got this PDF. This calculator. So we're not going to be talking about any kind of online calculators. So Tammy, excellent resource and very detailed. Well, great. I'm so happy that you think that way, because I'm really working hard on making sure that these are giving you like a lot of value. Let's see. So Joanne says, I can tell you've been putting lots of work into this for us. Thank you, and learning lots. You're welcome, Joanne. And so Tammy, you're in Kentucky. Yay! Deborah's in Joplin, Missouri, and Marie is from Mexico City. Joanne is from Nebraska. Sarah Swan, hello. She's from Iowa. Sarah's in Iowa. Let's see. Jane Schneider is from Wisconsin. Deborah, let's see. Circular. I guess I forgot what I was saying a moment ago. So I hate that about myself. I forget, what I'm saying. So then when I see your comments, I do apologize. But Sarah also said circulars. So I wonder what I was mentioning that required that provoked you to answer in that way. Maybe you guys can refresh my memory. So anyway, let's dig in. Okay, again, my name is Kara Warner, and I'm the host of Power Pearls podcast. And we are doing the Stitchucation workshop. It's all for the month of January. So buckle up and let's get going. Again, I'm talking about this PDF that you guys can get if you are members of the podcast over on patreon.com/Power Pearls podcast. So what are you going to need for today? So I'm going to talk a little bit about that real quick. So the supplies that you will need for this lesson. So you'll need to make a swatch if you haven't already done so. And don't stress out, because some of you were contacting me and saying, oh my gosh, I didn't do the homework. But anything that was required for this lesson, I'm going to talk about it now, because you can still do it. You can work on this at any time, and you can, you've got a whole week to do this. So we've got, we made a stockinette swatch, right? I had put a shout out on the Facebook group to do that, because this is what you're gonna, you're going to need to figure out your stitches per inch. It's basically working with understanding our gauge, but then breaking it down even further. And this right here is absolutely my favorite yarn. I'm using a yarn called Maya. It's Barocco Maya. I love it, love this yarn. I could knit forever with this yarn. And so I decided to do my stockinette swatch for our gauge portion. And so that's what I chose to do. And so I was going to actually make one of the swatches from last week's class, the Mira lace, which I talked about, which seemed to be very popular in the Facebook group, you guys. And I loved what some of you guys were doing. And Rachel, you didn't really like yours, but I really loved what you did. It had a very freeform look, as Melanie Fiedler said. So, but anyway, so you need your swatch, your stockinette swatch, so that we can really dig into understanding our stitches per inch. You need a calculator. This is the calculator that I was talking about. You need, and I love the big kind, the bigger button kind. Very easy to work with. And you need a tape measure. This is my little sock monkey tape measure. Isn't he adorable? And I know you're going to ask me where I got it. Well, I got it at a trade show. I got it at TNNA, which is a needle arts trade show that I go to every year. And it was just given to me. I don't know if you can still get it, but I will tell you that it is a lantern moon tape measure. So I'm just letting you know. I don't know if they still have it. But anyway, and then T-pins or straight pins. I like T-pins, and you'll see why in a moment. So here's a T-pin, okay? If you can see that. Because they're like dressmaker pins. And those are great, especially if you're going to mark stitches over a certain number of inches and so forth. So those are good. And then, of course, let me just move some of my stuff around. I'm trying to be as organized as I can so I don't have to move out of the video frame all that much. And the journal. You guys know I love my Knit Notes journal. And I have a fresh page ready here with this. This is what I love about it. So you can see, because there's graph paper on one side, and then all the notes I can put over here. Boy, they should send me money for talking about this book so much. But anyway, this is a great book. And if you don't have a book like this, don't worry. I mean, you can get all kinds of notebooks, Moleskines. It doesn't have to be a Moleskine, because you guys know I love talking about Moleskine, but because I'm one of those, I'm like a cult follower, but you can get books that just have the graph paper for knitting, and I think those are great. So if that's all that you have, I mean, for my taste, it's great because I can sketch and doodle, but then I'll always have a more structured area to plot stitches and charts and kind of get a little bit more mathematical. And look, you guys, we're talking about math. We're going into stitch count, stitches per inch and other things. but I just want you all to know that I am not a math whiz by any means. My husband will tell you, he's like, you're kidding, right? You're going to do this with these people? No, but I can hold my own. I did work as a bookkeeper for a bunch of years, but seriously, this is pretty basic stuff. So if I can do it, you can do it. Trust me, trust me. And so the other supply I mentioned is graph paper, but if it's in your book, like mine, it's in my notebook, then that's all you need to worry about. And the other thing is, I always like, even though I suggested a tape measure, I really like to use a big, sturdy, even if I used to have a small one that was like, you know, a fraction of this size, because to me, having a ruler that's like an elementary, you know, kind of real sturdy ruler is great for laying this flat on your swatch, because you know, a tape measure can be a little bit flimsy sometimes. A cloth, I should say a cloth tape measure can be flimsy at times. So those are the things that you're going to need for this particular lesson and everything we're talking about today. And that you know, and then these are the things that you can use throughout the week when you're working on the projects, the exercises that I talk about in this lesson. So, okay, so let's move on to swatch storytelling. And that's something that we did last week. So we had a collection of swatches, and I'm going to grab a few of them here. They're all around me. And so we were working on, as you guys remember, so we had a seed stitch. I had several different examples of seed stitch. That was one of our basic patterns. And then we had moss stitch as well. I'm not going to show all of these because we went through these in the video last week, and it's all in the guide. So you can go back and watch the archives. And this is easy to search by because all you need to do is just type in Stitchucation and you'll see, or yeah, it'll be right there in the archives. This mistake rib, and the thing that I love about both of these is that they are reversible. So that's something that you can always remember as a good part of your design element as we start talking about that, because it looks pretty on both sides, but it's also durable and practical for other types of things, like, I don't know, you know, I don't know, I'm trying to think of sturdier items. I don't know why like a rug comes to mind, but I tell you, this would be a great rug, wouldn't it? This would be an awesome rug. But you know, you definitely need to have that kind of rubber stuff to put on the floor that'll keep this in place, but this would be a great rug. And I'm inspired because I'm almost thinking, oh my gosh, that's what I got to make. I need one right over there. You can't see where I'm pointing, but that would be a great place. And then we also talked about, or I showed you and gave you the stitch pattern for the trellis lace pattern. And that is that can be worked on the right bias or the left bias. And I absolutely love this stitch pattern on so many different levels. And I've talked about it many times in these videos because it's the basis for just lots of different varieties of shapes and that sort of thing. So this is I just did one version of it, and it was probably the right, let's see, which way is this slanting? Because now I'm not sure which way I did this. So I think this was the right bias. Yes. Because I only did one, I just decided to keep going. So it looks more like, you know, just it slants to one side. Is that a parallelogram? Yeah, like this. Can you kind of, I think that's right. Maybe, I don't know. Now I'm trying to remember my geometry, but you guys, it's okay. I don't need to be that technical. So all I did with this was I just kept working the right trellis, the right bias trellis, and then I just changed my yarn at one point, and I just decided to do that for fun. This was made in Boboli lace. Boboli lace. It's wonderful to work with, and so I just had some samples on hand and decided to go for it. So those were our stitch patterns from last time. So my question today is to just, you know, and we touched on this last week, but what ideas? And this is something that you can answer in the comments, or just think about this and start talking about this with yourself. Have your own dialogue in your journal to be talking about this. You know, because what ideas, you know, what did this evoke in your mind? You know, what were you thinking? Like, what could this become a design? You know, could this be a larger? Imagine this. Okay, so this is for Barbie, but what if this was scaled up and, you know, would be like a pretty amazing looking wrap. Just this right here. That's it. So this is something that as we dig in and a little bit today, you'll see how you can actually supersize and make something even bigger just from working that smaller version, like the little baby. You know, I always love talking about the babies and then making the mamas. So that's kind of what we're going to be doing, if that makes any kind of sense to you. Also, what kind of a yarn, I'm sorry, what yarn and needles do you feel worked the best? So if you tried this in a variety of different yarns, let's say, your seed stitch, you worked in, this like a super bulky, but then you jumped down to like maybe a mohair. What did you get when you did that? Probably some really, really interesting results, I would say. And also, what about edgings? There's lots of different things, and I meant to bring down some swatches, of course, because I do apologize, because of my connection. So I was trying to gather some things. I'll show those to you next week, but be thinking about how could you take a swatch and start adding, an edge to it. So like, I don't know, I'm just sort of throwing it out there. Maybe if it's not an edge, it's like you could add some open work in between, like down here, maybe some eyelets, and then start your next square, pick up stitches and keep working. And then you've got an interesting seed stitch, but in between it's flanked by these interesting eyelets that go all the way across. Again, this is all visualization, for you guys to start thinking out of the box, okay? So, so just be writing it down. Get that journal out, and in the exercise, you'll see that I say just to go ahead and just get creative, start working in your journal, get those snips of yarn out, and, start taping them into your book. And really making it like it's a work of art, like I encourage you to do that, because that's what really makes it so much more enjoyable. And it takes it just from being very, very technical to something that you want to open your book and just look at it and just say, wow, this is so pretty. Just the sketches, just the swatches, just the snips of yarn. And so I also, I'm like to call this design daydreaming, because it's not heavy lifting, right? I mean, we want to enjoy the process, and I think designing is something that if we're not ready for certain phases in the process, then just do what you can do. Maybe you can only make a simple square or a rectangle, and translate your stitches and make that, which we'll talk about, because we're taking it in little doses, because by the time we're done with this workshop, you're definitely going to feel confident to make a new design, or at least, know how to take a pattern and customize something that's out there. And so those are your options. So spend time, doing the design daydreaming, because it's amazing. It's amazing what you can do with a stitch square. It blows my mind every time, because this, my friends, like I said in the beginning, and is part of the learning guide title. It's the blueprint. This is the blueprint for everything that you need to know to start designing. Right here. It's right here. It's right here. So, what if, so I was going to say, what if we picked up stitches along the edge and made ribbing? So we already talked about that. I was ahead of myself. But also I wanted to say, remember the seed stitch example that I showed you in lesson 1? If you don't know what I'm talking about, you can check out that video. But just by changing in let's say you've got this stitch, because I don't have that actual live stitch and I can't find it anywhere, but I showed you guys a picture. By, let's say, changing the needle size, going from like a size 3 to a size 13. So let's say this is a size 13 and then we go down to a size 3. What do you think is going to happen to those stitches? They're going to pull in, right? And then they're going to come back out again when you go back to the larger size needle. So that's a really clever way to start shaping. So be thinking about that as well as you're daydreaming. Okay. So this is great. So, yeah. So once you start thinking, you're looking at your swatches, you'll see, just an amazing world, some amazing possibilities. So yeah, think about the possibilities. What could it become as you're daydreaming? Maybe you can turn this into a cowl. Maybe this can become a change purse. You take another piece just like this, smack them together, and make like a little flap with a really funky vintage button. So you get the idea. So that's what I want you guys to be thinking about. And at this point, I wanted to see, do you guys have any questions? This is a good time for me to just say, hey, what's, anything that's on your mind, because I actually see you guys jumping in here, and there's a lot of talk. There's a lot of talk in the comments here. So let me go back, and I apologize for my eyes that are not the best. So I'm going back, you guys, and I'm taking a look. All righty. Oh, hey, Sarah, how are you? Sarah Meyer. There's a lot of Sarahs in the room, so that's why I said Sarah Swan, Sarah Meyer. So let's see. So Joanne says, I noticed you and the others put a border on your swatch, so it didn't roll. Wasn't sure if the swatches were to have a border. Guess that's okay. Absolutely, Joanne, it is okay. And by the way, if you had a chance to download the PDF yet, you'll see, and this was sort of like my way of reminding you. I said on page 4, I said, remind me to ask you how to make that little border on the swatch. And so I'm going to show you, but we're not there yet. But yes, it's not necessary. But I like it because, yes, if you're not, even, while you're making the swatch, before you've even blocked it, it's not going to roll. And that's very nice. So, and let's see. Boy, you guys are really asking a lot of, not asking questions, lots of comments here. So this is pretty darn cool. I just want to see if you guys at this point have any questions. So Marie says, I got many ideas for new projects. Well, that's good, because that's what this is all about. Hi, Angie from the UK, from London. It's quiet. Oh my gosh. All right, so you guys are talking about blocking, and that's cool. I mean, this is not going to be about blocking today because there's only so much time, and I would love to do that. We can do that at another point in time, for sure. Because as we know, it's when we talk about our knitting life, it's endless. All right, you guys. So, all right, let's keep going. So, I'm going to start to get into the nitty gritty here, and I'm going to flip the camera a little bit. And so let's start to empower our stitches. Are you ready for that? So it's time to measure our blocked stockinette stitch swatch. So if you haven't already done that, this is a good time to get that swatch out. Okay, so I will flip things around. So let me get myself situated here. All right, I'll see you guys in a few minutes. Well, not a few minutes, but a few seconds, of course. See how quickly, how efficiently I can do this. Lots of multitasking, by the way. All right, here we go. All right. Woohoo! Okay. So here's our work table, and I am going to bring over my stockinette swatch. All right, let me bring it down too. I think that's as far as we can go. All right. All right, so I started doing this on the mirror lace swatch that's up here, and I will show that to you in just a few few minutes, but here's my lace, or here's my stockinette swatch right here. And so this particular swatch was made, as I said earlier, with Maya. So it's made in Barocco Maya, which is one of my absolute favorite yarns. And I like to use a metal ruler actually when I'm trying to find my gauge. I think we might be a little bit far away, unfortunately. So let me see if I can bring us down just a little bit. That's live video, right, you guys? Let's see if we can, looks a lot better. I think you guys will get the idea. And I know that, you know, as I said, this is not necessarily a full-on gauge lesson, but you'll get the idea. So here we go. And so what we want to do is we want to place those pins. So we want to measure actually in the middle of our swatch as best as we can and place those T-pins or straight pins at 4 inches apart. So let me see if I can get in here and do this effectively. So there's that point. Now I do inches, not centimeters, so I hope that's okay. But in the learning guide, I did put information for centimeters because I know that's pretty important stuff. Okay, so there's our stockinette swatch. And what we want to do is we want to measure between these pins, because that's what our gauge is over those 4 inches. And then what I like to do is once I know what that number is, I'll write it on a little piece of paper, a little sticky note like I have here on my mirror lace swatch. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. Just gonna move that back over there. So for the sake of time, I can't really count. I'm not going to just go ahead and count all those stitches. But, you know, what you want to do now is then make sure that you place. So we count those stitches, and then we also want to make sure that we're going to count our row gauge as well. So I might as well just go ahead and do that. Let's see. All right. So I like to use a pencil. So for this particular swatch, and I did this on a size 7 needle. US, by the way, US needle. Okay. And then so we measure across and we get the stitch count, and then we'll basically measure down to get our row gauge as well. So in the guide, you'll see that basically what we want to do is we want to label with the information that we determine is our stitches per inch and our rows per inch. And then we start working on this magic formula. So I talk about this in the guide. And so once we have our, we know what our stitches are over that 4-inch section, and we know what our rows are over that the 4-inch section, then we divide that. The number of stitches, we divide that by the number of inches. And then that's where we get that one magic number. So for example, let's say this particular swatch is 18 stitches across, right? So if it's 18 stitches across, and then we divide that by the 4 inches, that leaves us with 4.5 stitches per inch, or 2.54 centimeters. So, and then our rows, let's say we have going down, we've got over the 4 inches, it's 26 rows. So then we would take the 26 rows and then we would divide that by the 4 inches, or 10 centimeters, and that would give us 6.5 rows per inch. And so basically what we want to do is that at this point we can start applying this formula to some different shapes. Okay, so in the guide I give you some ideas, actually, so some different guidelines for how to apply this particular formula that I just explained. And what I can do is I can show this to you on a video, in the video, because it's very useful. And once you actually have this under your belt, it really does open lots of possibilities. So here it is. So right here, so this is what I just discussed. So once we've broken down our stitches over that 4 inch area, or the 10 centimeter area, if that's, if you're working in centimeters, then you've got this number here, which really becomes pretty important, because that's what we'll use to actually start plotting and creating a design. So there it is, right there. Okay. So if you guys are ready to move on, then let's go ahead and do that. And so we got some homework, you guys, and I'm thinking that perhaps I should. Well, I'm not gonna turn it around. I'm gonna keep the camera on the table here, and just keep on talking if that's okay with you guys, because now we're going to talk about how you can actually just make a little design based on this formula that I just explained. And so now that you understand this, how to plot or how to determine that stitches per inch, then I want you to consider making a shape. So for example, we made some swatches and they were random sizes. So maybe I will turn you guys around for now, because I feel funny talking to I'm talking to myself. Okay, so that's better. Okay, so I guess I didn't plan this quite as well, because again, live video. Oh, we're back. Okay, so my connection was kind of was not doing the best right there for a second, so I do apologize. Okay, so now that we understand, I hope that we do. I mean, if you guys have any questions at this point, just shout out. Hopefully I explained that well. I think that maybe my little work area was a little bit too far away, so that was a little bit difficult to really explain it. But so you've got your stockinette swatch, and we really, because again, this is not, we're not digging into the gauge, how to get your gauge, because I think if you're watching, you already understand how to do that. But it really is to determine, over this 4 inch section of stitches across your stitch, across your gauge swatch. If you take that section, those 4 inches, and then you divide, you take those stitches and divide it by 4, then that's going to give you what, the 1 inch, so just that 1 inch little area, and then we're distilling it down so deep, so now we know we can take that information and use that to plug it in in a variety of different ways to create a new design or customize. Okay, so in the little guide that we have, I'm giving you a challenge, design it challenge. So I want you to consider making one of the following sizes. So to start, now that we get this formula, to make a 10 by 10 inch or a 25.4 centimeter by 25.4 centimeter square. I tell you, talking about centimeters is not the most, it's not the most intuitive. So you can make, that's number one. Number two, you can make a rectangle that's 8 inches by 16 inches, which would equate to 20.32 centimeters by 40.64 centimeters. Or pick your own size. Pick whatever size you want. Maybe you want to get really wild and supersize it and make it big. But that's your first little design it homework, I guess, if you will, so that you can leave after this lesson and take what you know and just start plotting and make it happen. So, yep, that's some good homework for you. All right, you guys. So basically, for other stitch patterns besides stockinette, it's like this is pretty straightforward. This is pretty straightforward. So Melanie says, what exactly? What exactly? So I'm sorry, can you elaborate on that, Melanie? I'm not sure what you mean by what exactly. And so I'll just keep talking here. So with the stockinette stitch, this just really helps us to break down the stitches per inch on a very simple stitch pattern. But for our mirror lace, for our ribbed patterns, for seed stitch, it's a little bit different. So for example, with a rib stitch, there's different ways to determine the gauge on that. And so it depends on whether you want it, if it needs to be stretched, if you want the gauge to be stretched or unstretched. So that's one way to look at a ribbed gauge. And so let's see. So Melanie says we need to make an item. Yes. So Melanie, basically what I said, if you look at the guide, so you guys, there's a guide. Of course, if you're here, you're part of Patreon. But even if you're not, I mean, you can basically take this little formula and plug it into 3 different shapes. So it's my little design it challenge for you. It's the first exercise that you can leave with today. So 3 shapes. The first shape is, and this would be to make an exact size based on the formula of plugging in the stitches per inch. So make a 10 by 10 inch square, or make an 8 by 16 inch rectangle, or your own shape entirely. So I was kind of throwing in the centimeters there, which got a little bit wordy, but let's just stick with inches because it's a little bit easier. So you guys could always check those calculators for, those online calculators, how to determine your inches, to translate inches to centimeters kind of a thing. So I'll leave you to do that. And so by taking your handy dandy calculator, which I put over there, but they're punching in the numbers and figuring out your exact shape. And you can do this with the stockinette gauge, the stockinette, you can use stockinette stitch. So that's really my suggestion as this first exercise, to do this with stockinette stitch. And it can be whatever you want. Maybe you made it loose and very meshy. So I want you to figure out what those stitches per inch are and plot those out on your shape. And my third option in this little first exercise is you can pick your own shape. You can do whatever you want. Yeah. So so basically, so as I was saying, so it's a little bit different with measuring for your ribbing and so forth, and with lace, it's a little bit different too. So that's what I wanted to show you next, and I was going to show you on the table, but maybe I need to kind of pull this over here and just kind of show you from this side of the camera. But maybe we can flip it over so you might need to see it better. You might need to see it that way if I flip it around. Because I'm going to show you, how to figure this out for a lace pattern, which is a little bit different. And so then you can try to kind of plot this one out too as your little challenge on page 4 of the PDF, a little challenge exercise, if you will. And so so I show you mirror lace, which we talked about quite a bit. Here's the mirror lace pattern, right? And I also have this as a much bigger swatch as well, which I can grab if I don't get stuck on my wires. So here's here's a bigger version of the mirror lace, which I showed you guys last week. But for, you know, learning purposes, I've got this smaller version. I just want to make sure it's facing the right way. So it's not upside down. Melanie, thank you for correcting that, because last week I had, the picture was upside down. So this particular swatch is what we're using to understand. And so what I did was I put pins. You see the T-pins there? Those T-pins, I marked the repeat, okay? So this is how we would, this would be how we're going to look at a very basic lace pattern repeat. And so the mirror lace is 8 stitches. Okay, so it's 8 stitches plus 2 for balancing stitches, but when we measure, we're going to actually measure the repeat. So this repeat was measured, or sorry, this repeat was worked twice. Okay, so what I did was I put a pin at the beginning of the repeats, so you can see that. Okay, and then what I did was I measured between those pins, and that equals 3 inches. Okay, that makes, following me here? So basically it's 3 inches and it's 16 stitches, right? So what that equates to is, and I wrote this on my little handy dandy piece of paper here. So let me flip, you want to flip around? We're going to flip it around. How's that? We'll try this one more time. Here we go. So here it is, okay? And so it's 2 stitch repeats, and that's what we did here. And I measured this. So it's these 16 stitches, and it measures 3 inches across. So I did that here. You see my little cheat sheet here? You can kind of get a good idea. So it's 3, and I put a lot of information on this little sheet. So it's 3 inches. So it's 16 stitches divided by 3, which equals 5.33 stitches per repeat, or I'm sorry, per inch, right? And so then that's how I know what this breaks down to per inch. And then I just keep that label right there so I don't forget. And then you want to do the same thing for the rows. So basically it is a 16 row. It's a 16 row repeat, okay? And so so it's 32 rows. Okay, so it's a 16 row repeat, and I worked it twice, so that's 32 rows, and then I measured that. So this is 5 inches, okay, so it's a 5-inch span, and then that breaks down to 6.4 rows per inch, or 2.54 centimeters. And so that is what I put down in my book, and I just make a little note in the little corner. And once I have these 2 magic numbers, right? This number here, the 5.33 per inch, and then I wrote on the back, the 32 rows equals 5 inches, and then I determined that it was 6.4 rows per inch. And that's what I'll use when I'm doing any kind of new design. So for example, if I wanted to make this really big and make like a beautiful stole, then all I need to do is, you know, if I want to figure out how many stitches I need, I just basically I take those stitches and I times it by, let's say it's, maybe I want it 30 inches across, and I multiply that, and then I have to actually figure out how close the multiple is. So I want to make sure that I am close to the 8 stitch multiple. And then for this particular pattern, the mirror lace needs 2 balancing stitches on either side. So in a nutshell, that's pretty much it. And then let's flip it all around again. So let's see if you guys have any questions at this point. All right. And it's so hard because the screen is so tiny, and I may have to jump in later and really dig into the comments. This has been quite an interesting experience to do this with you guys on live video. So Melanie says, but I don't know, in the worksheet you said about picking up stitches. Well, no, I said that was an idea. So Melanie was like, imagine, like, what if you picked up stitches? So we're not picking up any stitches. Basically, our goal here is to understand, you know, that little area on this, whatever pattern you're working, and what does that translate? What does that come down to as far as, you know, how many stitches do we need per inch to in order to plot a new pattern or a new design. So that's basically the idea of this particular lesson. So Marie says, so knowing our number of stitches and rows of a particular swatch empowers us to design a project. Yes, exactly. So I'm trying to kind of take it in small chunks so I don't overwhelm anybody, because, you know, we still have 2 more lessons, and so this was just to really help you kind of distill and break down to those number of stitches that you get over that 1 inch section, so that you can use a little math. Like I said, if I can do this, you guys can do it. So use a little math and kind of scale that up to make it an even bigger design. So let's see. So Melanie says, using the same yarn and needles as the homework swatch. You don't have to, not necessarily, no, you don't have to do that. Yes, and Joanne asked if I could share the label, and I did do that, so hopefully you saw the label, Joanne. But you know, really, I always make a note of the needle size, the yarn I'm using, the gauge over the 4 inches, and then my gauge over 1 inch. Well, I hope you can get started on this soon, on this soon, Jana. And Jana strongly dislikes math. So do I. So sorry if I sounded a little bit scattered there. But yeah, so yikes, math. But this was really simple stuff. If you guys get that PDF, you'll see how very, 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 very simple this is. So we got to wrap it up. So there was one other thing that Joanne, you said a lot earlier about these little border stitches. Remember the border stitches here? So basically, once you know what you're working on, you know, stitch wise, and you have your repeat, and like in this case, let's say the mirror lace is 8 stitches, and you work let's say you do this, like this is work twice, so you work it twice plus your 2 side stitches to balance it out, because it's 8 plus 2. And then for this swatch, it's got the 4 stitches. I'll show you the real swatch. There's 4 stitches on either side flanking the actual stitch pattern, and then there's garter rows on the top and on the bottom. And so what I do is I worked about 4 rows in garter, just knit 4 rows, and then I would knit the first 4 rows and the first 4 rows of every row, and then the last 4 stitches of every row. And that's wrong right side, it doesn't matter. So then that means that you always get garter stitches on either side. So just imagine that the first 4 stitches of every row is just garter, and then what happens in between is really, that's your pattern repeat, and that's where all of that magic stuff happens right there. And so that's what I wanted to mention in case anyone wanted to do that. But I think that maybe a lot of you do know how to do that, but I know some of you are just starting out, so you don't. So I really wanted to explain that a little bit, because I love doing that. As you can see here, I did it with my stockinette swatch as well, because it really does help the stitch lay a little bit nicer. So here's the challenge. Here's the challenge exercise for you guys. So I want you, based on what I just showed you with the mirror lace, to understand a repeat, because those 5, I think it's the 5 stitch patterns that I gave you in lesson 1. If you break those down and you figure out how many stitches you need to design whatever it is, like a shape. So we had that shape that I mentioned, those 3 different dimensions. And you'll see this in the worksheet, but if you're not a member and you just want to, you know, kind of get the benefit from the video, I mentioned making an 8x8 square, a 10x10, a 10x10 square, an 8x16 rectangle, or the third one is to pick your own shape and make up your own dimension. And instead of making it from the out of stockinette stitch, this is your second assignment. So number 1 is to do it in stockinette. Number 2 is to pick a stitch pattern. It can be anything you want, and figure out how many stitches it breaks down to the inch, then figure out how many stitches you will need to make one of those shapes. Now you may need to add a stitch, delete a stitch, whatever it is that you have to do. You may have to add some stockinette, those little edge, remember the little edge stitches. And so that's the challenge. That's the challenge exercise, if you're ready for it. If you're not, just stick to the first exercise that I mentioned and just work on those shapes, because this is about perfecting this to get that exact size, so that you know, okay, I made an exact size 10 square, I made a rectangle. And then when we get to the next lesson, we're going to talk about how to make it bigger, how to supersize it, just like I showed you earlier with the little the trellis piece, the parallelogram. Imagine that, instead of it just being for Barbie, and then you scale it up to make it for yourself. And that's what you can do with this magic, with understanding stitches and how to customize them to make something that you want to make for yourself. So I hope this was valuable and informative for you. And I'm sorry about earlier with the connection issues. I'm just trying to see if you guys have any other questions. Okay, so Melanie asks, go over the centimeters. Dividing by 10 is easier. Yes, absolutely. Dividing by 10 is easier. So yeah, if you want to do the 10 by 10, right? I mean, that's pretty easy. I think that's what you're asking, Melanie, or mentioning. So Christy says, I need to figure out how to do lace. Mine was really messed up. So Christy, and this is something that we can talk about in the Facebook group if you want, because it's a matter of, so for example, your lace pattern, maybe you missed a yarn over. I don't know, maybe that's something that happened. But yeah, let's talk about it. Let's chat about it in the Facebook group. So awesome. Okay, you guys, I hope this was good for you. I hope you learned some good, valuable stuff today. And let's get on Facebook, the Facebook group together, and let's start chatting about what's coming up, what we're going to be doing this weekend. And please remember to share with your friends, and just let me know what you think. Let me know what you want to know for the following lessons too, because I feel like this is all a work in progress. So if you were to say, and anything that you share is welcome, like, hey, I wish we learned this in lesson 2, or maybe that was too simple for lesson 2, or maybe that was too difficult for lesson 2, or I didn't understand that part of the lesson. Please let me know. Please let me know, in the comments here, in the Facebook group, on Patreon, or, contact me. You can send me an email. That's cool too. Or send me a message here through Facebook, since you're watching this on Facebook. But anyway, that's it. I'm going to stop babbling and I'm going to get going. So you guys enjoy your weekend, and I'll see you next week. Okay, bye.